Well, welcome. I am Ann Nelson with Siouxland Republican Women, and I am very honored and excited to be visiting today with Helen Boyer. And Helen Boyer has been an amazing contributor to the Republican Party here in South Dakota, and certainly to all of us as women moving forward to help our political process. So, Helen, thank you for joining me today. I just can't even express how excited I am to have this time together, so thank you for that.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. I live at Trail Ridge, and it's a wonderful place for me. And I have run into a lot of wonderful people here who share my philosophy, which is a real attribute. And I'm so happy to have you
and Lisa Marie is joining us here. Yep, that's all right. Lisa Marie is joining us behind the scenes here, so we're blessed to have her.
And we'll discuss some of my favorite subjects, I know. I love talking about the Republican Party, conservatives, family. It's just a good opportunity to talk about the things we love to hear and talk about.
It is. Well, let's start with the Republican Party. How did you choose, or what was the influence to you to take action and be an integral part of it all?
To begin with, when I married my husband, I was 19 years old, and soon after we were going to go and register to vote. And all of this was new to me. My family wasn't a voting family. And so we went to a gymnasium in the town that we were living in, and I didn't know what to do. And my husband said, just mark Republican. And forever after, we've been Republicans. And then through the years, he got me involved with friends of his that were running for office. I think Jerry Simmons was the first person that I ever did volunteer work for, and he ran for Congress. And I was frightened out of my wits to make phone calls. And I think that the man that was managing it thought that he would never hear the end of me, because I'd make 3 calls and call him up to see if everything was going okay. Then I went down the road and did other volunteer work, and through the years, my family just stayed Republican. My 2 daughters and their husbands are Republicans. My 2 daughters were involved with teenage Republicans and college Republicans. And Michelle, who is married to Don Hager, it was National Teenage Republican, State Teenage Republican, and County Teenage Republican. And we were very proud of her for doing these things. She worked hard on a newsletter. They worked hard on campaigns. And then after they were grown up and away from home, it was natural for me to stay involved quite a bit. And I've worked on campaigns, and I've done a lot of volunteer work. I worked in the Republican office, and I have met some of the finest people that you could ever ask to meet. Hal Wick being one of them. And it's been a good life. And along with this, I've met a lot of Christians, because I feel like the two go hand in hand. If you're a Republican, could you not be a Christian? And if you're a Christian, I hope you're a Republican. It's just a good life.
Well, that's neat. You know, I appreciated hearing you say that you were uncomfortable making phone calls in the beginning, because I think a lot of times we all kind of sit back and say, oh, I couldn't volunteer because I don't like working the phones, or I wouldn't know where to begin. But you dug in and you did it anyway.
Right. And it was rewarding. It wasn't what I chose to do, and then I did it so much that it just became a natural thing. Yeah. And I think to this day I could probably call up and get somebody a couple of votes, but I don't do it anymore.
Well, you know, you've truly set a foundation for all of us in what can be done and how to do it, and so there's a whole stream of women that are participating, and men that are participating now too, and that's, I think you've set an amazing foundation for that. You know, you had mentioned at our meeting a little bit about setting up the basement or setting up the kitchen table with all of those, all the stuffing of envelopes and so forth. Share with me a little bit about what that was like, bringing all that into the home and taking on that part of volunteering.
We enjoyed it. We either set it up around our dining room table or our in our basement, and it was nothing to do a 2,000-piece mailing, and we did go on to larger mailings. And for any of you who consider volunteering, it's so worth time. And you can say, well, that they're paying so-and-so to run a campaign. It takes much more than the person who's being paid.
It does.
And the volunteer is a priceless commodity.
It is, and I think it's a great way that we can contribute to the process.
Definitely.
It's a way that we can say, you know what, I didn't sit back. I took action, and maybe I'm not the one who can run for the office, but I really believe in this person, and by taking that volunteerism to that level of helping them, you really are putting your voice out there and helping them move things forward.
And my family has continued this.
Yeah.
They all do a lot of volunteer work and are appreciated, and then can appreciate the fact that they got somebody into office that's worthwhile and can be looked up to.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you've done an amazing job of bringing your whole family up with their value system. They all know what they believe, and they're strong-minded in that. And share with us a little bit about how you instilled those values in your children and how you got them to take on those responsibilities with politics.
By the fact that I worked in the Republican office and worked for candidates, my children were involved. My husband was a notary public, and my daughters just thought nothing of pitching right in and helping wherever they could, whether it be going door to door or making some phone calls or doing a mailing, or they just, where they saw the needs, they were glad to pitch in. And to this day, they all do things like this.
Exactly.
And now my grandchildren, of course, and my darling granddaughter Jenna Hager won the election last year to be in the legislature, a thing we're very proud of, and the people around her were so helpful. She had a volunteer force you wouldn't believe, and then when she got into office, the other legislators were such a help to her. People like Manny Steele and Al Wick, and they were all very good to her.
They all have a special tie to her through you too. They see that, and I think that's kind of that family aspect that starts to come around in South Dakota politics, is when you grow them up understanding that we're all part of the process, and then they grow up as adults to become a part of the process, they're kind of enveloped into that whole political family too.
They really seem to be.
Yeah.
And for anybody that has a family that wants something to do and get involved, they can call up a candidate's office, or they can call up the Republican office and say, do you have some things that we could learn to do to be involved to support a good candidate?
Yeah, that's a wonderful suggestion. And I think in our family, we spend a lot of time at the dinner table talking about the different political things going on, and we haven't held back. We've been very open with our children, and so they do learn it from the beginning, and then they start to see and how they can get involved. And as you said, it's nothing for them to go door to door, to stuff envelopes, and that's what we started to see in our kids, is when somebody's running for office, they're, oh, well, I can go door to door. I don't even have to talk to anybody. I can just put all those flyers out.
Right.
And so it is good. And then they want to learn more, and that's important. And I love that they start to question what they're learning in their history books.
Yes, definitely.
I want them to question that and come home to the table and say, now tell me what's real.
That's right. And I have a 10-year-old granddaughter that has been volunteering for a long time because she goes along with her family, and she helped her sister, just volumes of help for her sister that ran for the legislature.
Yeah. And is this Jenna's?
This is my granddaughter Emma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
She's been a wonderful help.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's neat. What are some of your fun memories of different campaigns?
Well, we used to canvass neighborhoods. We'd have a night picked out, and we'd get people to sign up. And your dad remembers this very well, I know, because we'd all meet at a place in a particular precinct, and people would go out then from, whether they used the back of our van or if we had a house or some place to just actually locate at, then they'd go out from there with literature or whatever, and go door to door and actually meet people face to face and find out what was on their minds. And it was a wonderful contact.
Neat.
And I'm sure that many of the men, Dave Munson, he did so much canvassing and going door to door that I'm sure that's why many people remembered him later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he was a wonderful person to go out and do that.
You know, I think there's real value to that door to door, because you really hear straight from the people what's important versus
You do.
just reading about, you know, we have a lot of great things about social media today, but when you really hit the doors face to face, then you really get what's real.
You do. And I can't remember a particular incident. I probably will tonight when I'm in bed. But
well, you can call me on it. I'll add it to a story later.
No, because it was a wonderful experience. If there were negative experiences, I don't remember them. I do remember that sometimes we'd go out and it would threaten to rain, and we'd all feel threatened by that, and we'd gather our stuff up, and then it looked sunny. So then everybody'd start over again, just go out and do their job and get it done.
Oh, that's neat. You know, you've done this so many years, and you've had the ability to see the influence of your actions and all of that. What would you say to young families that are thinking about whether or not this is necessary or even important to their family activity?
If you look at the way government is today and see what's happening, you know that you want to have an influence on what is happening, because it's your life, your future, your children's future. And when you look at what problems government's having now, if you don't put good people into those places, what do we have?
Yeah.
Bad people. And we certainly don't want that. And for the few politicians that don't meet your needs, there are many that do meet your needs and need your help. I think it's terribly important that we look into and fight is it Sharia?
Yes.
The Sharia.
law.
What business does anybody have putting that in our United States? That's one of the ugliest things I've ever heard of. And that must be gotten after. And I think that we need to look out for the finances. I know there have been a lot of criticisms of cutting back. Nobody wants to cut back. I never wanted to cut back my spending as a housewife, but it's necessary for all of us. And it has to start here, not in somebody else's neighborhood, but right in our own neighborhood. We have to cut back spending and spend only as we should, cautiously, and watch out for the economy, because overtaxing is bad, and we want to encourage new entrepreneurs and people that are starting businesses. And if they're taxed beyond their means, they can't get that new business going. And that new business going means jobs for more people, and we have to watch out for that.
You know, I wish you'd run for office.
Oh, years ago, people would say that to me, and I'd say, I'd love to run because I like to campaign, but don't vote me in.
But you know what? When you feel that strong and you're so eloquent with sharing your thoughts, and I so appreciate that. But that's where I want everybody to recognize that you truly can be involved when you share your thoughts and your insight like this with others, and encourage other people who maybe have the means, the ability, the time frame in their life to run. You know, when you share that with them and help them move forward, that's how we keep getting good people in. So we may not get you to run for office at this point, but we'll keep taking your insights and your thoughts. That's a good thing. So, anything else about being Republican or about politics today that you have thoughts on?
Politics today is much different than it has been in the past, I think. I think that a number of people go into office and see the way, oh, I can better myself. I can have more gain for my household and for my family. And it's not my. It's watching out for the people that voted you in, and the people that have needs, and the people that are they're supporting you on and on if you have a good interest. But if you get in that office and promote your selfish needs, I hope you either get impeached or you lose the position.
There we go. I could make a list. I won't do that right here today, but I bet we could make a list together of...
Just talking about current times.
Yep, exactly. So, oh wow. This has been such a joy. I love being with you. Very fun.
I enjoy being with you. I love being with the Republican women. The night that I wrote the check for my dues to be an inactive member and got the idea to invite you out to Trail Ridge, it just bloomed, and I loved having you around. In reading your newsletters through the times that I belonged, I just have felt inspired by this group of women that are doing so much for the boys overseas and for things that need doing around, and for bringing to light things like the Sharia law that need to be brought to people's attention. And your letter is inspirational, and the people, you leading the group and the other young, not necessarily young women, but the other women, you bring so much to us.
Thank you.
And it's really made me feel good to know you're out there doing these things.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you for that. It's been fun. It's not something I saw myself getting into. Sometimes I think we are put in a position to make choices that maybe we didn't see ourselves doing. And so it's been a fun venture, and certainly I've learned a ton.
Oh.
I'm constantly having my eyes opened. I find myself doing a lot more learning, and because there's so much more learning involved, there's so many more things that I want to ensure that my kids pick up and understand now. I don't want them to just go through life and just experience life for their own sake, but to see the bigger picture. And I think too, as I was so inspired by just the few words that you had shared when we had our meeting here, and I thought, you know, it's so important to me that we all recognize that as families and as volunteers and even, you know, individuals without children under their wing, we still influence people around us. And so we need to live by those beliefs that we have, and we need to encourage others. And I had an interesting conversation with a girlfriend whose daughter had gone away to college, and she says, you know, I always thought she knew we were Republican. I just didn't think about it. And her daughter called home and said, oh, I registered to vote. And she said, oh, well, how did you register? And she says, I'm not sure. Let me ask my roommate. And her roommate says, we registered Republican. And her mother went, oh, thank goodness. And she says, Ann, I just didn't realize that we hadn't made that crystal clear to our children. And so, you know, it really got me thinking that, you know, you really do have to lay it out for them. You really have to say, here's what we're going to do to be participating. Here's how we believe. This is how we stand as Republicans, and this is how we stand in our household. And, you know, I remember growing up with my dad, and you know, it was a sin not to vote. And if you did, oh my goodness, you would not dare not vote, because you knew you would make Dad disappointed. Oh. Even as a grown-up adult, I know I don't skip voting. I mean, I wouldn't now anyway, but you know that he was so strong to him and so important to him. And I remember growing up, and one time he was flying, and his flights got changed, so he wasn't going to make it home in time to vote. And he was so upset, and he went to all these means to have my mother get a ballot FedEx to him so he could get his vote in and have it FedEx back in time to be counted.
He would do that.
He would do that, yes.
Yes.
And that's, you know, it's seeing your parents do those kind of things. It's seeing your parents stuffing all the envelopes and making the phone calls that help grow you up, knowing you still you take part.
And for any family that's young and new at all this, just talk to Ann, talk to any of the Republican group, or call the Republican office.
Exactly. There's always room for people.
Definitely.
We need them all, and I was thinking ahead, you know, 2012 is coming up, and a lot of things are going to need to be done, and we're going to need a whole army of people to take action.
That's right.
So
yeah,
it's a good time to get involved.
And it's fun to see the enthusiasm.
Well, you know what? Enthusiasm breeds that much more of it.
It does.
You know, when we all come together, it becomes that much more exciting and that much more passionate, and we all move forward even more so. So
definitely. When we were involved, when we talked to people, we encouraged them to register to vote, and that's all you can do, I think, is word of mouth. I'm not sure. I think there are some public service entities that put out the word
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, have you registered to vote? This is where you can register to vote, and how you transfer your registration if you're somewhere, you know, from somewhere else. And we'll have to take careful note of that now in the coming year.
You know, that is a good point. And I remember in high school, we, on election day, if we were in government class, we were allowed to be out of government class and be out of school for half a day if we were going to volunteer that day.
Oh boy.
And so my would have been my junior, senior year, because I was driving. I went down to Republican headquarters, and they said what they needed from me was to drive people to the polls.
Yes.
And there was a young man who came from out of state. He was from another small town, but that was his civics class. Volunteering was to come to Sioux Falls, and so between the two of us, we would navigate Sioux Falls and pick up people and drive them to the polls so they could vote and drive them home. And it was real impacting to me because I thought, you know, this is the way we do it. This is how we ensure that everybody who wants to vote can vote when they can't get out on their own to do it. And, you know, I couldn't even vote at that point, but it was something that I could do to help make sure that the people were voting.
Which brings to mind, Jane, or Ann's mother is a marvelous baker, I'm sure. And people oftentimes bring treats to a volunteer office or a Republican office, and that inspires people that are there working. It really does. Oh my goodness, to have a cup of coffee or a glass of water and a freshly baked item, it's positively exciting.
You know, food works.
It does.
Food. Well, think about it though. Food is what brings us around the dinner table together.
Yes.
And it is part of our tradition as families and people is to get together and have a little fellowship together over
That's
some
right.
food. So there are a lot of ways to volunteer.
Definitely.
That's neat. That's a good idea. Driving, baking, calling, stuffing, even just running yard signs for people, and just calling and getting 10 people who will put a yard sign up for a candidate, and even if it's not your thing to go door to door, to put up those signs or to say, hey, you know what, my friend's running, this guy's going to be a good guy, you need to write him a check.
Yes.
Because we got to have the dollars too.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to run a campaign and a lot of different things, so all neat. You know, Helen, this has been such a joyful time for me to have this time to visit and share some of these different thoughts and ideas. What would your parting words be to our listeners today when it comes to being active and being a Republican?
I would say start. If you aren't a Republican, or if you haven't gotten registered to vote, or if you've been just sitting back idly not knowing what to do, find out what to do today. Either call the Republican office or contact a good friend that's a Republican or a legislator. People in office will encourage you, and you'll never be sorry.
You were right on with that. You will never be sorry.
No.
I've learned so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.